We'll get started. I'll just do introductions now. My name's Alex Wilson, team lead for alexshaywilson.com. Below me, we have Kyle DeVigi, co-founder of Remax Wealth Builders Real Estate and an investment expert. And then over here, there we go. I'm not sure which way I'm pointing was. But over there, we have Amit, mortgage broker, and does a lot of work with us, specializes on the investment condo side, knows the pre-construction condo world, and really knows how to help people build a working portfolio-wise. And I have mortgages with him. We refer our clients to him. He's been great to work with and a real expert. So what we're going to do is we'll start off with, I'll let Amit talk about himself a little bit, give some information on him. Then I'll go into just a quick little presentation wise, a little different from anyone's been on my past webinars, just because we're getting into numbers wise. It's really beneficial to have the numbers on the screen so you can follow along to see how do you really leverage equity and the benefit of growing your portfolio wise. And then after that, we'll go into a question and answer period. We can answer any questions that you may have. So actually, Kyle, why don't you give an introduction to yourself as well? So we'll start with an introduction. Kyle, let everyone know who you are. And then Amit, you can let people know who you are.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. My name is Kyle DeVigi. I am co-founder of Remax Wealth Builders Real Estate, director of operations here, also a real estate investor and licensed sales representative as well. I currently own 4 investment properties in Toronto, plus a semi-detached property.
And Amit, why don't you give some background on yourself?
Absolutely. Thanks, Alex. Pleasure to be here. My name is Amit Puri. I am a chartered accountant turned mortgage broker. I've been in the business, I've been an accountant for just under 20 years and been a mortgage broker since 2009. I've had the pleasure of working with Alex for almost, I think, a decade now. I myself am invested in the pre-construction space as well, and through the guidance of Alex and his team, and simultaneously our job here is to help provide whichever guidance you need. At the end of the day, what I think is most important for the consumer is that as brokers, we have access to more than just a single bank. So that is one of the biggest things that we bring. And that's the ability to say you have a gambit of 24 banks that you can go to for different options. So, and we can get into that in more detail in the chat, but that's what I'm here for.
Yeah, and right even before this call, I had a conversation with an investor-wise, and they already have 7 properties. And one of the key things is when you're growing into a larger portfolio-wise, it's really knowing what the policies of different banks and credit unions are, and the various lenders out there to know how many properties you can have. So some people may tell you, well, you can only get 5 and that's it. That is completely untrue. You just have to work with the right person that knows how to expand your portfolio, and dealing with the different financial institutions and knowing which ones will take what and which ones will make exceptions there. And the rules change every day. So it's also being on top of the rules and how they're changing and everything like that. So that's why you really need a trusted financing professional on your side to help you navigate these things. Easy to get one mortgage, but as you start adding on, it all takes planning and structure wise. And that's how you grow that multi-million-dollar portfolio stress-free, right? Like mortgage stress is the worst stress. So having a plan in place is always helpful. Okay, so we'll jump into now. So I'm going to share my screen with everyone here to show everyone. We'll walk through the presentation on how to leverage your portfolio wise. So why maximize your portfolio? Equity in your property is dead money. So what I mean by that is, let's say you bought a property for $200,000 and it's worth $400,000 now. That's great, but you can't access that money unless you sell the property. And if you sell the property, there's tax consequences, fees for selling the property. But what you can do is you can leverage your property so you can take out money of that property. that's using equity, other people's money to expand your portfolio wise. And the key thing, what you want to do is put that money then into another property. And that's where you start seeing the growth of your portfolio wise. You always want to ensure you're paying the right and lowest interest rates. There are different times when you want to use a home equity line of credit, and there are other times you want to do a refinance and a mortgage wise. So you always want to make sure that you're using the right tool to run your portfolio. And what I run is I call it the Goldilocks method for cash flow management wise. So if I have too much positive cash flow, it just gets taxed away. So it's great if you're making a surplus cash flow of $500, $600, $700 per month. But unfortunately, every year, the government is going to include that into your income wise, and it's going to get taxed away. So what I would rather have is instead of having one property going up in value, I'd rather tap into some of that excess cash flow and have 3 properties going up in value while still maintaining a positive to neutral cash flow level. Now, you don't want to go too crazy and get too much negative cash flow, and that exposes you to extra risk. If you're not able to maintain your monthly obligations, we put ourselves in a situation where we have to sell. Now, the only time you lose money in real estate is when you sell it. So never sell. So what I mean by that is never put yourself in a position where you have to sell. That's when you're going to be forced to sell. And if you're forced to sell during an opportune time, that is when you're going to lose money. So you want to avoid getting into too much negative cash flow. So the Goldilocks method is neutral cash flow, minimizes our taxable rental income, and efficiently uses equity by maximizing the number of investment properties that we own and that are appreciating in value that is getting equity paid down. So again, going back to owning 1 versus owning 3 properties, if I own the 1 property, that excess cash flow is great, but again, it's getting all taxed away. But if I own 3 properties, again, they're all going up in value, so I'm getting 3 times the appreciation growth. Plus, I have tenants in those 3 properties that are paying down the mortgages on each of those properties. So I'm getting 3 times the equity pay down every year as well. That's how things can really start exponentially growing wise. And when we get near the end, you're going to see what I've personally done and how you can do that too. So I start off with a case study. This is all stuff I've done myself, real life properties, real life examples wise. So my first condo I bought in 2012, my first investment condo I bought in 2012. Kyle also has a condo in this building as well. And the key thing, we bought this in 2012. The building registered in 2016. We both still own those condos wise. So by buying and holding, you're always going to make more money than buying and selling. And you're going to see this in this example. So original purchase price was $262,400. Current market value, $500,000. Now this is the current market value when I did this presentation in 2018. The value's gone up since then, but it's great to see this, to show even the growth from 2018 to 2020. This condo now is worth $600,000. But when I did this presentation, the numbers, it was originally worth it got up to $500,000. So the current mortgage, $202,841. Market rental rate, $2,100 per month. So what I do is the current market value is $500. So I go to the bank, Mr. Bank, where I go, Amit, my condo is worth $500,000. Can I increase my mortgage on the property? And it goes, okay, we can get you up to 80% loan to value wise. The appraisal came back good. So we're going to give you $400,000 of refinancing. So what happens is I take the refinancing amount, 400. I subtract the current mortgage of 202, and I have $197,000 worth of available equity. And the bank will literally put that amount, 197, into your bank account now wise. Now I have $197,000 that I can redisperse back into the market wise. So what did I do? I took that 197 and I bought 2 pre-construction condos. So I bought 75 the Esplanade and Canary Block. The purchase price on those, $380,900, and the other one, $578,900. Now, those went up in value. So the current market value, again, in 2018, they've gone up since then, was 483. So I made 102,000 on the appreciation on 75 the Esplanade. The Canary Block, it's 750. It went up 171,000. So by leveraging the equity and buying 2 additional condos, I made $320,000. They went up in value. So that's great, but there's more. I feel like I'm an infomercial, but wait, there's more. So what happens over 5 years? Well, so I buy the property, I hold the property, but now I'm going to hold 3 properties, and I'm going to, let's see what happens over the 5-year period wise. So I'm going to assume a conservative 5% annual compounded growth wise. Growth has been greater than that, but I like doing a smaller number to provide digestible appreciation wise. But the average rate appreciation for downtown Toronto condos is 9.4% over the last 5 years. So let's look at what's going to happen over the next 5 years. So in 5 years, that $500,000 increases to $638,000. Plus I have equity pay down of $44,000. So less the original mortgage of $400,000. In 5 years, I gained another $282,000 of the Canary condo wise. So I kept that first condo, had it since 2012. Now I've made another 282 on it. But 75 the Esplanade is also going up in value. So in 5 years, remember this was done in 2018, so that's why it's 2023. The value in 2023 is $616,444. And here's the crazy thing, guys. Right now, this condo 2020 is worth $616,444 easily wise. Is the 1+10 in the St. Lawrence market area. So by holding that for another 4 years, I make another $133,000. The Canary Block going up to $957,000. I made another $207,000 off of that property. So my total gain for holding those properties for another 5 years is $622,846. Plus, I made $320,000 by buying them pre-construction in the year I refinanced. So at the end of 5 years, at a 5% annual compounded growth, it's gone up 622. Plus the original 320 it's went up. By leveraging the one condo, I've increased $943,000 from keeping the Carnaby and then buying 2 more condos. Now compare that to if I just kept the Carnaby, well, it's gone up to 622. My equity pay down 222. My before tax cash flow, so I do make positive cash flow, is 40,180. My total gain without leverage, 185,000. So versus nearly $1 million in gain versus $185,000. That is the value by leveraging the property and taking that and holding on to the property wise. So you see that right here, the difference of $757,000, a 409% gain versus the other unleveraged portfolio wise. That's why you want to run an efficient portfolio wise, because you can really see exponential growth in your personal real estate wealth. So which portfolio would you prefer? Now, where I show everyone real estate is a long game, this is my personal portfolio wise, the years that I bought the properties, the current market value of the properties, but I look at things 10, 20, 30 years out. Now, I'm not concerned about what's happening today wise. I want to know what my portfolio is going to be worth in 30 years. Now, these numbers in 10, 20, 30 years, I went even more conservative on the growth wise. This is only 3% annual compounding growth. So if I look at all these properties that I own, and I look at the growth in 30 years, the total worth, it'd be net worth because there's no mortgage on the property. The total net worth of these properties is $33 million. And why I did 30 years is that all my mortgages are 30-year amortization. So that means in 30 years, there'll be no mortgages on these properties. So in this example, I'm assuming I'm not making any excess cash flow, which I am making excess cash flow, but I'm not even factoring that in. So I want to make this calculation really easy for people. So assuming a neutral cash flow level, every year it's going up 3% in value wise. What's the total value in 30 years? $33 million. Now, this all started with one. This started with that first Canary condo right here and leveraging that and continuing to grow the portfolio. And how I was aggressively able to do things, I did eventually buy a high park triplex. I used a line of credit. And then when you see, we can see 2017, how many, I bought two, but 2018, 2019, I bought four in 2019, one, two, three, four, I bought four in 2019. You can see it, my accelerated buying process wise, because I had more and more available equity to continue to invest the portfolio wise. Now, there is inflation, so I wanted to take that $33 million number and I wanted to see what is the equivalent worth of that in today's dollar value. So I get an idea what will be my purchasing power realistically in 30 years. So that whole thing will be worth an equivalent of $19 million. So I will have a net worth of $19 million with current purchasing power in 30 years by using essentially other people's money to continually refinance and grow their portfolio. And the key thing is that I have a tenant on the other end that's covering and paying down the costs on the property. So instead of having that one property where we looked at that example and we expanded it to 3 properties, well, I continue growing it to where I'm now at with 16 properties wise. And that's where you really see that crazy growth of numbers wise. And let me just stop the there. That's where we see the crazy growth wise. So really anyone can do that. It's not hard. It's just doing the refinance, identifying the opportunity, and then taking a buy and hold strategy with that. Now, last time we talked, Amit talked about his portfolio wise. He does even more aggressive numbers than me. You run your portfolio at 5% growth, right?
Yeah, actually, if you look at the CMHC average of what the actual growth rate has been in Ontario, it's, in my opinion, hovering, not opinion, in fact, it's hovering at around 7.8 to 8%. If you look at the last 50-year chart. And the growth models that we always use is 3-4%, maximum 5. So actually the final numbers are, in my opinion, good for us because we're using a 3-4% modest figure, and the actual historical number has been closer to 8. And these aren't numbers that we have to make up or look at. You could simply log into CMHC's website and look at their stats. It's provided by Statistics Canada, so it's readily available information. Meaning, our models are short on the top end. They should be a lot bigger, those numbers, which is good for everyone.
There's an interesting comment in the chat actually that said, okay, if I'm only getting 5 or 8% a year, why don't I just put my money in an ETF or something?
Yeah, I was seeing that too. Yeah, you take that, Kyle.
Well, the difference really is the leverage on the property, meaning you're not putting down that entire amount to purchase the property. You're only putting down a small percent. With pre-construction and most investment properties, it's 20%, meaning you're leveraging that property. So you're going to realize a significant benefit from that. So your 5% will actually be a 20% return because you're using other people's money, paying a tiny interest payment, but getting that appreciation on the entire purchase price, not the small deposit that you put down. So that's where you can really turbocharge your gains and your returns. Where if you invest that money in the stock market, you're only getting that on the entire amount you've put in, not the purchase price.
Yeah, so if I could add to that, because I love that question. So
great question.
Let's keep the numbers simple for a second. You have $100,000 and you put it into the Dow Jones or S&P or an exchange traded fund. Let's say the fund is amazing and it earns 7% a year. Next year you have 107. It's that simple, right? But in real estate, the 100,000 buys a 500K property, and if the 500K property goes up 7%, that's 535. So you've made 35,000 versus 7. And not to get into the tax impact of it too much, but when you cash out the ETF to use it, you got to pay tax. Whereas with the property, when you refinance it, it's tax free. So there's no comparison between investing in the stock market and real estate. Real estate outperforms any ETF over the long term, and the long term is like a 75-year horizon if you look back all the way to the 30s.
And what I want to add too is I'm actually quite risk adverse in some cases, or I manage risk well. So I have very little exposure in the stock market wise. I'm in various chat groups and people are talking about the stock market currently and the fluctuations, like, oh, you need to get in this stock. Look at Tesla's gone up threefold over the last 3 months, like just crazy things. And I haven't invested in the stock market. I literally have cash on the sidelines, waiting for an opportunity wise. But I haven't done anything. One of the key things about leverage wise and investing is that I have the tenant on the other end. So I'm not exposing myself to, yes, I have extra costs by I'm increasing my leverage. So that means my interest expenses are increasing. But on the other end, I have someone that's paying down that cost. So I'm always associating my extra expense with another individual that's going to pay my cost wise. And when I look at population growth models wise, I know that, well, we continue to need roofs over people's heads, so that I always know that there'll be a tenant that's going to need to live in my property wise. Shelter being one of Maslow's hierarchy of needs wise, someone is always going to sacrifice to put food on their table, for warmth, and a roof over their heads. So I'm going for basic human fundamental needs, and that I always have someone that's going to be living in that property wise. It's why I invest in the GTA. It's also why I've been investing in Calgary as well, which also has a net population growth of 10,000 people per year wise. So it's really a risk adverse way to investing wise, because people need roofs over their heads, and I'm focusing on areas where we're going to see continued population growth wise. Whereas if I use leverage and I put in the stock market wise and things go down or doesn't, or they don't improve, I can never get that money back. So it's really a long and boring game. But if you just play the long and boring game, you can really generate serious wealth wise. We didn't even talk about this last webinar, and I'm going to have to look up the stat, or maybe Kyle, you can Google the stat quickly. But if you look at the top wealthiest people in Canada or the US wise, the majority of them made their money in real estate. You're gonna have people that are tech billionaires. You're gonna have people that are corporate buyout specialists, and then you're gonna have the real estate people wise. Those are generally what your people are on the wealthiest people. So I'm not a corporate buyout specialist. I only have a degree in finance and economics wise. Kyle, you have the computer and business degree, so maybe you still have the tech idea brewing wise. But I'm building my wealth in real estate wise. It's just really the simplest approach wise. And I saw a great line here. I'm just in the chat. Again, ask your questions in Q&A, but I do. It's a very simple question. How do you get mortgages for these properties? I call Amit. But what it is I get that question often, and I've referred people to Amit, where if you go off the street and walk into your regular branch for a mortgage wise, they may not know how to deal with you and to package your portfolio wise for the institution to provide you for a mortgage. So that's where you go to someone that does this day in, day out, and gets the mortgages for people. And again, specifically, does a lot of investment condos and does people with large portfolios wise. They know how to structure the portfolio and how to get you the mortgage wise and put you in the best light. So the answer is speak with a mortgage professional that knows what they're doing and how to structure these portfolios. Just like I'm not going to do a commercial lease, don't know how to do it. I'm not going to go sell an industrial property, no idea how to do it. I'm going to refer you to someone else wise. This is what Amit specializes in. He knows how to do it. If you go to your branch at the end of your road, it's not that they're incompetent or anything like that, but they're a jack of all trades. They have to do many, many different things, whereas Amit specializes specifically in growing people's portfolios and providing mortgages for those.
If I could jump in on that, Alex, as well. So I was an accountant. I worked at KPMG and Deloitte, and then I transferred to TD Bank. TD is where I got my career started in head office, and then, long story short, became a mortgage guy. So what used to happen at the bank is I started out at the branch, and you'd have 10 customers walk in and you could only help 6 of them. And it's not because of lack of knowledge. It was the toolbox at your disposal. Every bank has minor nuances and differences between the way they approach the mortgage. And there was a great question in the chat about rent. Some banks don't use any rent. Some use 100% of the rent. Some don't care about the rent. They just do their own analysis to make sense if the property is profitable. Every bank is different. TD has a different rental policy than Scotia, and Scotia has a different one than RBC, and RBC has a different one than CIBC. And if it doesn't qualify there, the part of going into the branch at the corner to get the answer that you would get from myself in less than 5 minutes would take you a week, because I know the policies at 30 lenders: Manulife, Desjardins, MCAP, RMG. The list goes on and on. So I don't look at a client and say, okay, how do I make you fit at TD? I say, okay, what's your situation? Which bank fits that situation? That's the different approach. So, the issue on the broker end that some, clients have over in my experience is most brokers aren't knowledgeable about all the differences at every bank. So they're unable to fit the client somewhere, and then it leads to a negative experience. The difference with our team is I make it a passion of mine to make sure I understand every minor detail, so that when a customer calls me, I always say a mortgage is always going to happen. It just depends at which bank and which rate. That's really how I look at it. And Alex, you've seen that over time as well.
Exactly. And I've personally done different types of lending as well. I've even went to private lending sometimes as well. Not for any. No, I know I did it on the condo side too. For some short-term financing wise. So it's just how you structure the financing wise, and taking a top-down look at the whole portfolio wise, not just one specific property. And again, that goes into a great question there about this. A lot of people hear about the stress test wise. After this one, I'm going to go into the Q&A off of, but this is the last chat thing. I'll do this. The stress test wise, that's applying to people that are buying their first properties wise. So if you go and you buy the house you're going to live in, you're taking on debt to buy the property wise. And as Amit said, it depends on how the financial institution takes in the rent. So the rent is income for the property wise. So yes, there's a stress test, but if you're buying an investment property, you're adding income to your bottom line, which is covering the costs of the property wise. So the stress test is more of an impact on people that are looking to buy their homes to live in versus on the investment property wise. And then even beyond that, there are financial institutions out there that the stress test doesn't apply to as well. So that's where knowing the right institution to work with and how they work. It's not about getting around the stress test. The stress test is all about making sure first-time home buyers weren't overextending themselves. It does apply to investment properties, but it's not the workaround. It's the rental income that's attached to it that helps offset things that the stress test doesn't apply as much. Would that be the best answer, Amit, to that?
I think that is the right answer. I think what the stress test has done in a nutshell for people to understand is it's done is it's reduced the maximum amount of proper loan you can get in total. And the main thing to understand in terms of the stress test is that your loan limits, again, it comes down to the different bank approaches. The loan limits are based on per property is the loan limit, not the aggregate. So, keeping the numbers simple again, if your combined income with you and your spouse is 100 grand, your mortgage limit is 500 grand. But it's not 500 in total, it's 500 per property, depending on which banks we can go to. So I haven't seen the stress test impact the ability to get mortgages. It's simply reduced how much you can get. So again, keeping it simple, prior to 2017, when the stress test didn't exist, you could get about 10 times your income as a mortgage. It sounds absurd today, but that's what it was in 2016. So 100K income could get $1 million mortgage. Today, it's 500. They essentially cut the limits in half. And so that's, yeah, I agree with what you said. And just to add to it, that's what the stress test.
So that's a great example why. So the stress test applies per mortgage wise, not the total aggregate amount of not the total aggregate of mortgages wise, depending on the financial institution you go to. And again, if you go to a person at the bank level, sitting there, they're a trainee, first day on the mortgage job wise, they may give you a completely different answer because they don't know how to structure the portfolio to do it that way.
I think the biggest thing comes, the biggest thing comes down to is people always ask me like, are you sure I can have 5 properties? So, again, going back to the simple math, if you make 100,000 as a couple and your mortgage limit is $500,000, you can have 5 mortgages for $500,000, which is 2.5 million, but you can't have 1 mortgage for 2.5 million. That's where the confusion starts to come, because people start to say, oh, like I have, 2 million in mortgages. Can't I buy a $2 million house? No, it's per property. It comes down to the rental offsets and the bank saying, you know what, every property you own is profitable. So then that's the way we can do it. And so I think that's very important to make that clear distinction that it's per property. And at the end of the day, what stops everyone from doing this is people's ability to save for that next down payment, right? I mean, people would buy 5 properties per family, but most of the people don't have that 20% down.
We get that question a lot, actually. Like, why aren't you investing in all of the developments coming out? Or why aren't you buying 10 in this investment? And it's exactly that. We're limited to the amount that we can save each time and put down. We want to be investing in every opportunity that we're recommending, but we just can't because of that main factor.
So I'm going to jump into the Q&A now. Okay, so Amit, at what point do we contact you about financing mortgage for our pre-construction condos? Do we do it at the construction process or closer to occupancy? I'll jump in on this one, and Amit, you can clarify. I say about a year out, a year out before closing wise, or when you're expecting to close. That's a good time to reach out to Amit Wise in regards to getting an idea of your financing for the pre-construction condo from a year out from closing wise. And the reason for that is that allows us time to figure out how to best structure a portfolio for that next mortgage. I like a year out. What about you, Amit?
I think it's case specific. I think there's multiple parts to that answer. If you have concern that you don't know if you're going to qualify, or there's a change coming in your job, or you're planning to quit, or you're planning to move countries, or whatever it may be, having that call as fast as possible is important. And the reason being, if you have a closing in 2022, as an example, we can get the approval today. It's a matter of holding it for that length of time with the bank. Is it something that we have to do? No. But if you know something is changing down the line for yourself, or you want something concrete in writing, we can get that done. But yes, I think usually about 9 months to 12 months in advance is when you should start getting your ducks in order. Again, it comes down to the client. If you're self-employed and you don't know if you have enough income declared, call us way in advance. We can plan 2 years out, making sure you've declared the right income on your taxes. If you're salaried, and you know that you're going to lose your job and the mortgage is coming up, you can get the mortgage done before the bank finds out about any changes in your income. It's all case by case. Every story is different and everyone requires a different approach. So I think I don't think there's ever too early of a time. Like, I mean, even clients that we have closings out in 23, 24, 25. The conversations have already happened, just a matter of waiting. And again, having a team like this with myself, Kyle, and Alex, we're going to be here for the long run because it's all we've been doing for 10 years, probably longer even. And so when 24, 25 comes around, we're still going to be here. And if the rules have changed, fine, we'll adjust to those. And if you know need to assign it, or you're going to close, or you're going to sell it, that's where Alex comes in and Kyle comes in. So
Yeah, and yeah, that's always having that conversation with Amit-wise is good. I would say don't wait until 2 weeks before. That's when things get more difficult wise. Can things still be done? 100%. They're just going to cost more money. That's all. Michael, great to see you. No, you cannot get equity out of a pre-construction condo. You have to wait till the building's complete. So the whole model is based on mortgages wise and refinancing a mortgage. In order to get a mortgage, you have to have title on the property wise. So you're not able to get any equity from a current pre-construction condo, unfortunately. I've great question. Been hearing that banks will not lend if the deposit is paid for using a home equity line of credit. How can we get around that? That is incorrect, completely incorrect wise.
that's correct. That's
And
incorrect.
you jump in on that one.
It comes down to the bank. The only bank that's actually said you can't use a line of credit for down payment is Scotia. But no one's paying attention to the bank. They've just blanketed across all the lenders. So that is incorrect. And there's ways to deal with it. Instead of taking a line of credit, you could just take a mortgage out on the property and use the money. It's a technicality in the lingo. So yes, that is incorrect. And yes, you can use a line of credit for down payment. All we have to do is make sure the bank we apply to is okay with it. And a lot of them are. It's not a blanket decision across the industry.
Yeah, and now it's the media picked up on it and blew it all over the place. But it's a completely incorrect statement wise. When you are refinancing, does the bank deposit the money in your bank, meaning you can use it for anything? Also, do you recommend, for example, using $10K to pay off a line of credit or credit card and the rest to use as a down payment? The answer is yes, they deposit it right into your bank account. And yes, use some of that to pay off any line of credit or credit card. That's bad interest. That is true debt. So you do want to pay those items off. But yeah, they deposit it right into your bank account, literally. Now, when you do a refinance, for example, wise, a refinance goes through your lawyer wise, and the bank will deposit the money into the lawyer's trust account, and then the lawyer will deposit it then into your bank account wise. So I should clarify, because I always say the bank literally gives me a check. The bank sends the money to the lawyer, and then the lawyer sends the money to you. So the refinance actually happens through a lawyer wise. Just so everyone's clear. Home equity line of credit, that's done at the bank level. There's no lawyer involved. That's just the bank is opening a new bank account for you, and that money's there. That's correct, right? There's no lawyer in a home equity line of credit, is there?
There is. Again, it depends on the bank. Some banks do it in-house. Some require a lawyer. Again, the purpose of the lawyer is to protect both parties, both, the client who's taking the mortgage and the line, and the bank. So just to explain that in 10 seconds, the lawyer's there to make sure that no one's taking a mortgage on someone's property without them knowing, right? You don't want some stranger coming off the street and taking a mortgage on your house because the bank wasn't able to verify their ID. And then simultaneously, the reason the lawyer is involved for the bank is in case you're paying something off, or if there's another mortgage that has to be paid out, they have to make sure the bank is protected. So lawyer or in-house legal team at the bank is involved on either mortgage or line of credit.
Could you go through an example where when you take a secured line of credit on a condo 1 to 2 years that has gone up in value, and then deciding to refinance the mortgage renewal at year 5, how much money would be available at year 5 if you're already maxed at year 1 and 2? Well, if you do 5% annual growth wise, so we use our examples, 80% loan to value. So if you do 80% loan to value of the current market value, and then subtract what the mortgage is. So that's all you need to do on that. So if you just do an Excel spreadsheet, do compounded annual growth. So what compounded annual growth means is if it's going up 5%, so I'll just do 100,000, I'll do, 100,000. So 100,000, if it goes up 5%, that's 105,000. So then in year 2, if it goes up 5%, it's 5% of 105,000, not just adding another 5,000 to that. So that's your compounded annual growth wise. So at the end of year 5, if you take 80% of that 5 years of 5% annual compounded growth and then subtract what the current outstanding mortgage is, that's the amount of refinancing power that you have. And remember, over that 3 years between year 2 and year 5, you've also got a tenant paying down part of the mortgage, because every month a mortgage payment comes in. Part of that goes to interest, part of that goes to mortgage repayment as well. So that I think that covers the answer there. Alex, I noticed that you only ever buy one condo in a project resulting in 16 different projects. Is there a reason for this? Great question. Builders actually don't let you buy multiple units in a project wise for their financing wise. It'd be great. I'll go buy a floor in a building. They don't like that because their bank partners don't like that. And the reason their bank partners don't like that is that if you didn't close in those 4 properties, well then what would happen at that point wise? So the banks see it as risky to selling 4 condos in one project wise to one individual wise. So it would impact the builder's bank financing wise. So it's more that I'm typically not able to, maybe I could do 2. If I put one under my name, one under my wife's name. But that's the reason why there's not more than one property. When getting a mortgage for a primary residence versus investment properties, are the rules different? Similarly, getting a mortgage for a first or second investment property is different. Doesn't matter if it's pre-construction, the investment property. I'll let you jump into that one, Amit Wise. So just
Sorry, where is that question?
1123. By anonymous. Should be right at the top.
I don't see it. Do you want to just read out the question and I'll take it?
When getting a property for a primary residence versus investment property, are the rules different? Similar.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, answer that part. Yeah.
So the rules are not different on primary property versus investment. The main thing that changes, it depends on the bank again. Some banks want to see a little bit of net worth that the client has as a backup. So some of the banks will say for every investment property, we want to see $50,000 of savings. Now that savings can be RRSPs, stocks, RESPs, anything. It's not liquid cash. So it's some form of savings. That savings can also be the equity that you have in other properties. So there's easy ways to get around that. The main difference between applying for a primary and investment property is usually the interest rates are slightly higher on an investment property. So to qualify as identical, there's just sometimes something to do with either net worth or the rate.
Okay. Okay, so I'll answer this one, Sam. So I try to keep my example simple wise. So when you bought the 2 condos using your home equity line of credit, how did you calculate the amount to paying that loan off to pay it over 30 years? It's just actually I didn't use a home equity line of credit. I used a refinance to buy the 2 pre-construction condos. So it's a refinance. So again, when I refinance, my monthly mortgage payment goes up, but that's over a 30-year period. And then the tenant is constantly paying down that property wise. So when I'm dealing with my investment condos, I always want to refinance. I'm not doing home equity line of credits off my investment condos. I'm doing the refinance. You can use the home equity line of credit, but you will eventually refinance that at one point into one mortgage wise. So the time I'll answer, there's another question in the chat and I'm going to answer this example using her. So Danielle, for example, she said, I wish I would known you 10 years ago. I will be in touch. Can we refinance 1 year before the mortgage terms ends? So yes, does it make sense? Amit will let you know. But in her case, Danielle, you may do a home equity line of credit for 1 year to tap into some of that equity to reinvest that. And then when the mortgage term comes up, then you'll refinance that whole amount into the property wise. So that's how, using the refinance model, your mortgages will always be paid off. Okay. Do you get the accountant lawyer costs back per year? I got a quote for almost $2,000 a year for a separate holding corporation, even if you already have another corporation. Well, they're a write-off on your tax return. There is additional costs when you have holding companies wise. That sounds about right for a return, a yearly return on your holding company is about 15 to 2K per year on a holding company wise. Already have home equity line of credit on my properties, but it's still not enough for a house down payment. Are there any options to acquire capital? Yeah, Mike, talk to Amit. He can always try to find you some more money. Amit's a dealer of debt. So,
Yes, I am. Yes,
so-
I'm the
so
Heisenberg of debt.
So Michael, the answer in that is, to get more money is just going to cost more money, and if you get qualified for that. So call Amit. On pre-construction, my experience is that they sell them at a higher price than current market value, as if they are projecting what they think it'll be worth in 5 years. Therefore, the amount you gain is not as high because they're inflating the price. So is the increase less than 5% until 5 to 8% until it closes? Well, actually, my numbers that I gave to everyone are the numbers that happen. So, and those returns were greater than the 5 to 8% wise. So if my numbers are what was on the spreadsheets wise. Also, you have to factor in that when that building is done, the newer building is going to sell for more than the current stock that's out there. So new product is going to always sell for more than resale product. When that new product, you get the key to that door wise. There's still extra appreciation on, there's still a bump on that price because someone wants something that's new, never lived in, versus something that's been lived in before. So you got to factor in that gap as well. So yes, a pre-construction is typically going to be more expensive than the resale market at that time. But also in tandem, when you actually get the product wise, let's say 4 to 5 years out, that new product is still going to sell for more than the current resale product that's out there.
And to add on to that too, Alex, pre-construction condos, you often have favorable deposit structures, and you don't have to have all of the money up front. I mean, you can pay, normally it's 5% at 30 days, then 90, then normally about a year. And then that final 5% plus all the land transfer taxes, closing costs are out once the building has actually been completed and registered. So it gives you a significant amount of time to save up for that building while you're still getting the appreciations in the real estate market for it.
Okay, so would you eventually get to a point where you have borrowed a certain mortgage and your income would no longer qualify for more? And what to do at this point? Example, I had to get a guarantor to take out equity on one of my properties because my 95 income plus rental income wouldn't qualify to service the additional 200K of equity I'm taking out. PS, this was with CIBC. Well, it really depends on who you're dealing with and how it's structured wise. So without getting into without seeing what's behind the curtain wise, I'd say speak with Amit. It's just all about how you're put on paper wise and how you're presented to an underwriter.
Yeah, I think just to add to that, as the comment mentioned, it's CIBC, so you're bound by CIBC's policies. So, if every bank has a different debt level that they'll allow a customer to have. And one thing that a lot of people don't realize, in Canada, there's 3 levels of bank lending. There's AAA lending, which is your CIBCs and TDs and Scotias and Royals. Then you have your monoline banks, which a lot of us have heard of. You got your Tangerine, PC Financial, all the smaller lenders that exist under the bigger brands. And then after that comes a type of lending called credit unions, which also are known as B lenders. They have slightly higher rates. So as an example, instead of 3%, maybe their rate is 4%, but they will lend way above what the normal banks lend, like CIBC and TD and BMO. So like Alex said, based on the details, there's always a solution that's possible. And so you should give us a call and we can work it out.
Great question here, because we do get this question as well. Do you see Toronto become as expensive real estate as New York, for example? Is, is it realistic to assume 20 to 30 years down the road that every year the property will go up in value 5%? Wouldn't it reach a ceiling at some point? Well, I do 3%, not 5%, so I'm even more conservative than that. That's just trending above inflation, 3%. Which if you're looking historically, 2% is what inflation rates are. So that's definitely within realistic expectations of growth wise. But the thing you have to factor in is that it's not just local money at play. There's international money at play in major centers across Canada wise, whether it's Vancouver, Calgary, Toronto, or Montreal. So it's not just your local domestic factors that are at play. It's the international money that comes in as well and will always continue to come in. So when you look at international money, they're looking at Canada as very affordable with real estate prices, and as well as just the currency conversion wise, we're 74 cents on the American dollar right now. On top of that, we are nearing the largest transfer of wealth ever between generations wise. So as inheritances or as parental support comes and helping other individuals, that has impacts on the real estate values. So it's not just tied to income wise. There's international money and generational money at play, which do lead to increased pricing as well in real estate wise. How much should you go negative cash flow? Up to you. I don't have a number on that wise. If you were to go negative cash flow, what number is safe wise? It just depends on what your comfort level is within your portfolio and what you have the ability to service wise.
I think a good answer to that, Alex, which was up way in the beginning when we started the webinar, is I think there's an important distinction between negative cash flow based on interest only and interest and principal.
Yeah, equity paid out, yeah. Mm-hmm.
So, if your mortgage payment is $2,000, usually half and half is interest and principal. So if the rent is $2,000 and the mortgage payment is $2,000 and the property tax is $300, that doesn't mean you're losing $300 a month. Your actual cost is only the interest and the property tax. The rest is you buying into the property yourself with equity. So I think when you use like the concept of negative cash flow, you really need to look at, is it actually a negative cost or is it negative in terms of getting ahead on the property?
Okay. Where we go? Okay, so how soon can we refinance a condo after closing wise?
Next day.
Next day, there you go. Next day. Yeah.
It depends on the bank. It depends if you structure it right. There's some banks that don't allow it for a year, but if I know right at the onset of the application that the goal, you buy a condo for $500,000, you take a mortgage for 400. By the time you close, it's worth 800 grand. So you want to bump it up to 640? Absolutely. It's half the time I spend doing that is actually getting people their money back out of properties, but we have to do it with the right bank so that you don't incur costs left, right, and center trying to do this maneuver. So the answer is next day.
And I can say from personal experience, Amit has done it for me. So I am a recipient of a very quick refinancing. Fatima, great question. What area would you recommend to start your first purchase? Toronto is pretty high in the moment. We like Toronto, obviously, always like Toronto blue chip. Oakville in the GTA, we see it as offering the best value in the GTA. And then if anyone's been following me, I'm very bullish on the Calgary market wise, where whether you're an established investor or whether you're a first time investor, Calgary offers an incredibly low price point for you to get in, a low deposit structure, and also has rental guarantees as well for up to 3 years that are all cash flow positive. So Calgary is really, I find, low risk with with potential to be a high reward at the end. If you go to our website, we have a full webinar on why I'm buying condos in Calgary, why. So that could be an option as well. When do I start buying companies and holding companies instead of my own name? Will I be required to use commercial mortgages, or do I still qualify for a residential mortgage? Just because you have a property and holding company doesn't mean you're getting a commercial mortgage wise. The commercial mortgage depends on the actual property, not on who owns the property. So it's still going to be a residential mortgage wise. Very easy to get. Mine are all in holding companies. You'll have to sign as a personal guarantor as well. When you should do that, if you're self-employed now, there are huge advantages to the self-employed. If you're just a regular salaried individual that gets a T4, what do you think? Like, do T4 individuals that need to do in the holding company, Amit?
So if I take off my mortgage hat for just a moment and put on my accounting hat, what you've said so far is actually correct. So it comes down to two issues. So when you own a corporation, the purpose is to protect yourself from liability. So the question you have to ask yourself is, what is the liability when you buy a residential property versus a commercial property? And so the easy example I always give is, if you own a grocery store and somebody falls in the produce section, they can sue your grocery store and the building. So the liability exists, so you should hold that property in a corporation. When it comes to a residential condo or a house or a townhouse or whatever it may be, the liability, if someone gets hurt, there's OHIP. And if the condo were to burn down, there's probably home insurance or condo insurance that protects it. So the liability doesn't exist to the same degree that it does in commercial real estate. However, the main reason to have a property in a holding company is if you're self-employed, like yourself, like myself, like Kyle, and doctors, lawyers, engineers, anybody that has their own business, so that you can move the capital from that company to the holding company without too many tax consequences. When it comes to a regular salaried person, I don't think a holding company is necessary unless you're approaching a significant number of properties where you're trying to then maybe move it on into a family trust or something. But long answer, yes, holding companies are good, but generally for self-employed individuals.
I don't believe there's a rule. Okay, so Michael, I don't believe there's a rule about reinvesting capital gains in another property within 6 months in order to avoid taxes on those gains. Put your accounting hat back on. Amit, do you know of anything about reinvesting capital? I think commercially wise, if it's a commercial property that you do your own business in, then there's a rollover that you can do. But for regular condo investing, no.
I think when I'm reading that question, I'm seeing a potential mix-up of a couple concepts. So when you have a capital gains, it means that you've sold the property and made money. I think the problem comes down to, did you tell the government it was owner-occupied or a rental? So if you didn't tell the government that it was actually a rental, but we're trying to do it as an owner-occupied, that's where the general rule, there's no rule around it, but if you wait about a year after making that money, you shouldn't get a clawback from the government because, I don't know how much detail you want me to go into on this, but essentially if you sell a property, make a gain, if it's from a rental, you should declare that on your taxes, which is what most people don't want to do. So then that's that cool off period where people usually wait 6 months to a year to see if the government catches them. And then they'll that's kind of where it is, that whole HST rebate and the capital gains on your taxes and all that. So
Okay.
I think that's what I'm hearing when I hear that question, unless I'm over assuming.
So Michael, there is no rollover. So what in regards to the way the question's structured, there is no rollover taxability to roll over the profit from one investment property to another investment property. It exists in the States. It doesn't exist in Canada wise. So there's no rollover ability wise. Doesn't exist. So if you have an investment property and you sell it, you do have to pay capital gains tax on that. My advice is always just to pay the capital gains. Amit's saying where people that go into a gray area, well, it's not even a gray area. It's pretty black and white. But if people try to get around it and just going, hey, let's see if I get caught, that's where the 6-month window is, that kind of thing. But there is no rollover in regards to capital gains.
And just to give the guidance on that, what the government does is all, just for more accounting stuff, they cross-check tenants' addresses with people who own them and see if rent was declared on the tax return. That's why it's about a 1-year thing, because you want to see the next year's tax returns, and that's where the government's coming in and catching people. So that's the answer to that.
And in order to get ahead is, so everything that we said, everything that I showed in regards to growing the portfolio wise, there's one key thing. Your partner in all this is the government wise. And if you don't do your tax returns, you're making Amit's job really, really hard. To get a mortgage without tax returns now you're in private money. So I don't want to say it's impossible wise, but you're getting into a very, very, very expensive money wise. You're not going to get a mortgage from your A's or B's. You're into your C's in regards to options for mortgages wise. So the risks that you do by trying to sell properties and avoid, because I never like the word avoid. Avoiding tax is bad. Paying the tax at the right time and deferring that obligation in the future, that's good. But you don't want to use the word avoid. If you're using the word avoid, that's bad wise. If you were then to get under an audit wise and things get frozen at that point wise, and you have upcoming properties, you've just stopped the whole game. You're basically, if we're playing Monopoly, you've gone to jail, and you got to wait till you get out of jail wise in order to start playing the game again. So the small term and the small potential gain by avoiding that tax versus the risk and the inability to play the game for a certain period wise, I want to keep on playing. I don't want to go to mortgage jail. So look at the risk side versus the reward. What should you refinance or pulling money? Primary residence or investment property? Investment property, if you have the investment property, always use the investment property. And if you're doing if you're using your primary residence to invest, use a home equity line of credit. That's what you want to use. Would you recommend taking a home equity line of credit prior to the end of a mortgage term in order to do a renovation so that you can pull more equity when refinancing? My scenario is for a house, not a condo. Yeah, you can just do a home equity line, increase the value of the property, and then refinance more property money, more money out of the property at the end of the day. That's completely fine. You can do that. What is your opinion on cheaper investment alternative like Guelph, Waterloo, Kitchener? Oakville. I actually prefer Oakville versus Guelph, Waterloo, Kitchener wise. If I'm comparing all those options, Oakville would be ahead of those options for me wise. And I truly say, look into Calgary wise. I'm a big fan of Calgary. Oakville. Okay, there we go. Oakville isn't cheap anymore. I think it's still relatively affordable wise, but if you're still looking for markets outside of that, again, take a look at Calgary. I'm telling you, take a look at Calgary. Go to my website, watch our webinar on why I'm buying condos in Calgary. I think there's huge advantages there. Last question, do you recommend variable rates for all your investment properties? I have variable. I have fixed wise. There are advantages to the variable mortgage wise on refinance. Amit, you answer that question. You're better off than me.
Too many answers that can come at it. The short answer is yes. Variable outperforms fixed 95% of the time in the last 100 years on a 5-year trending analysis. Again, something you can check on the CMHC website or on Statistics Canada. The only part that makes sense, because we're all investors, you're always moving, you're always flipping properties, you're always holding properties, you might be refinancing, there's lots of moves going on. A variable is the best bet because the penalties are minuscule compared to a fixed. On a $500,000 mortgage, the penalty in a variable is $2,000, whereas in a fixed, it could be $20,000. So it could hold you back from doing a refinance or buying that next property. So variable is a better option for investors any day of the week, and it's actually a better option for 99% of people. I only recommend fixed to people who are on like a pension income or a fixed income and they can't handle any sort of ambiguity, but variable is better in the long run, always has been.
Awesome. Great, guys. And I'm actually just going to post one thing here for everyone in the chat. Just talked about since we think even Oakville's expensive wise. There's my there's our insights on Calgary wise. Kyle and I did a webinar last. No, it wasn't even last week. It's just, this whole Canada in the middle of the week's thrown me off. This week on Tuesday we did it. There you can check on that. That was just posted today wise. Do we have any more questions? I see one more popping up. I keep my personal family income very little. Talk to Anna.
It's related to another holding company question.
Okay. Yeah. I would say, here's the thing. I pay myself. I pay myself a good number wise. So that means I pay more tax to the government wise. Amit could better work with you structure wise, but if I paid myself zero, I've just made Amit's job a lot harder to get me a mortgage on my investment properties, even though I'm like, Amit, look how much I'm worth. Look, see, like my company's bringing in this. And you're like, yeah. And then Amit's like, yeah, but you're not paying yourself. Your net income on your tax return is extremely low. You're like, yeah, but this, it makes things more difficult. So it just goes back to playing the game, and the taxes are sometimes your entrance fee to play the game wise. But I would say speak with Amit wise in regards to your structuring wise, and he can tell you what he can do for mortgages wise, because there may be other alternatives out there.
That's where the credit unions come in. They will do things that the regular banks don't. So again, case by case, if you haven't declared income, it doesn't mean you're out of the game, but you've essentially knocked out a lot of lenders that would have, entertained your application, but that doesn't mean that it's not possible. We just move on to a different set of lenders.
Yeah. Again, this is gonna be the last question that we're gonna get going. Is it a good idea to find a property manager? What's the general rate for that? Tenants defaulting due to COVID is a real concern, and income loss. So I own a property management company. Our rates are, we only do condos. We don't do houses. Our rate is $120 per month, plus HST for that. Defaults, 0. Difficulty collecting, definitely. We have had challenges from people wise, but overall, we've collected everyone's money eventually wise. So what I mean by eventually, they may not have paid for the first, but by the end of the month, we've been able to collect money from them wise through lots of conversations and everything like that. So we haven't had anyone default wise. Everyone's paid but one property, but that one property we inherited, and it was an issue before COVID wise. So it was always an issue wise. But other than that, as long as you have the right screening in place wise, and ask the right questions to your tenants wise when they're having difficulties wise, you'll get your money. So if you have any interest on that, reach out to me, and I can send you our property manager's contact info. So that's it. Everyone, thank you so much for coming on. Kyle, thank you for taking the time and organizing this. Amit, thank you for taking the time and providing your expertise. Contact details in the chat just quickly for everyone.
Sure.
This has also been recorded for everyone as well. So you will get an email copy of this with Amit's full details as well, with myself, my email information, with Kyle's email information as well. Reach out to us if you have any questions, because we truly want you to build long-term wealth and generational wealth for your family, because this is tried and true, and it's fully doable. And that's it. Cool.
Thank you, Alex. Pleasure as always.
Guys, okay.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thanks, Kyle.
Bye.